So Rick, speaking of an adjuster, what tips do you have for people on working with an adjuster to make sure that the claims process goes smooth and as quickly as possible?
Yeah, so one of the biggest hindrances to claims progressing forward is just not getting the information that's being requested. Understanding that at the end of the day, the adjuster here is to justify a payment to their bosses, to the company, right? And so when they're asking for that information, there's a purpose for it. They're identifying what's covered so that they can justify what determination they make. So by being in contact with the adjuster, and that means if you have an email address, please give it to them, because there's ways that they can send you certain documents that'll help to speed that process up. Making sure that we have the best phone number. And then when the adjusters are asking you a question, just be forthright, be honest about what happened. Nobody's out here looking to get each other. We're trying to support each other and make sure that we're paying what's due under the policy. The best way to do that is to just be as forthright with the information and be as responsive as you can to the adjuster.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily asking questions because they want to be a pain, right? It's like you mentioned, they've got to justify to their bosses and also the Department of Insurance, that they're paying this claim out appropriately. And to do that, there's a few boxes they have to check. And so sometimes there are some pieces of information that they'll need and they'll ask you. And again, it's not because they're being difficult, it's just they need that as part of this process.
Yeah.
What other tips and things?
Sometimes if you haven't heard from an adjuster, it's okay to give them a call.
Yeah.
I think people will have a tendency to want to hold off for a while and not reach out. But at the end of the day, if you feel that you haven't heard from the adjuster, it's okay to give them a ring. There can be times of the year where it's a little busier than not. And if you don't hear from them and you have an agent like us, you can reach out and we can help to just move that along. And then the other thing is they'll be looking for estimates a lot of the time, just making sure that we can provide those in a timely manner, that they understand the time frame of the people you're working with.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that covers a lot. And I think that, if you can stick to that process and, make sure everything is getting communicated clearly and quickly, that really helps move the claim process through.
100%.
All right, Rick, as you know, most of the time the claims process for the clients that we work with goes very smoothly, but let's talk about the example of what, where it's not going so smoothly. What tips and tricks do you have for, a policyholder, for an insured, if the claims process is, whether it's getting stuck or, you're just having a hard time? What do you got?
Yeah, so there's always a couple things that can clog up a claim. One of the ones I saw most frequently is just people not getting back to each other. So when it comes down to that, the benefit of having an independent agent is that we can be that point of contact to at least help move things along and get them in contact with you. So if it's a scenario where you're not hearing from an adjuster, feel free to call us and we'll reach out and try and get that expedited and moving so they can at least get back in contact with you. Then when it comes to actual differences over determinations of either coverage or determinations of the amounts, there's a couple things that you can do. So if coverage has been established but you don't agree on the value, there's something called an appraisal clause. And you can ask that you have the appraisal done. And that process will involve the company picking a representative, you picking a representative, and then they will meet. These representatives are disinterested third parties. And they'll come to a valuation that both parties have to agree on. And that will keep you from having to go into court or get drawn out further and come to a fair and equitable settlement.
Right.
That's something
kind of a voice of reason, right?
It's a voice of reason, exactly. And so those two guys meet with someone called an umpire, again, a disinterested third party, and that person's settling everything for it. So there is that option. And then obviously, if there's issues with the particular adjuster themselves, whatever that issue may be, you can voice that to us as the agent, and then if needed, we can escalate that up to the appropriate parties. And again, that's another benefit of having us in our corner. While we don't have the authority to make claims decisions, we do have a relationship there with those companies, and we can lean into that to your benefit to keep things moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we get pulled into a claim scenario like this, it's often, kind of the first step is, we'll place a phone call to the adjuster and try to get their feel where things are at. And then, we can kind of poke them along if they need to, get back in touch with an insured. Or, if for some reason we feel like we need to engage their leadership, we can do that. And then all agencies have a assigned representative from a company called a marketing rep, and sometimes we have to pull those in. So that's really where we can provide some value in a claim scenario, is if things are not going well and you need a little hand, we're happy to, reach out and see if we can help smooth things over or give them a little push along.
Certainly.
Awesome.